si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia? Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
Civiltà dell'amore. Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Buon pomeriggio, buon pomeriggio.
Good afternoon, everyone, to all of you who are here in the room and to all of you who are online on the website of La Subsidiarietà website that has decided to organize the 3 days entitled Living Longer, Living Better, Welfare at a Crossroads with me and my mate, Irene Elisei. Good afternoon. Welcome back. So this is the third day. So when talking about welfare, as we said in the first day, we often talk about healthcare and pensions. Social welfare is more marginalized and neglected. And as yesterday we said when talking about the disabled and assistance to infantry, families find it more difficult to find their everyday problems. And through Social Security, we can see that there are increasing differences between the North and the South, those living in the city and in the periphery. So today we have with us some politicians to ask these questions and to understand the way forward. Let's introduce our guests. We have with us the Undersecretary at the Ministry of Economy and Finance, Lucia Albano. Welcome back. And next to her, Massimiliano Fedriga, President of the Conference of the Regions and President of the Friuli-Venezia Giulia region. The member of the European Parliament, Stefano Bonaccini, until a few weeks ago, President of the Emilia-Romagna region. Last but not least, Pierciro Galeone, the Director of the Institute for Local Finance and Economy of ANCI, the Association of Italian Municipalities. Welcome back. Before giving you the floor, I want to show you some numbers. Those of you who followed the first 2 episodes of our talk already know about it, but this is a good starting point for the debate today. So let us see the data concerning the welfare expenditure in 2023, 632 billions divided into 50% for Social Security, 21% for healthcare, and 16% only for social policies. This allocation of resources has risen some imbalances over the time. This is why we want to make you hear the opinion of an expert in the field. I met Professor Maurizio Ferreira from the University of Milan, president of Secondo Welfare. So this is his comment, and then we'll start the debate with our guests. What are the strong points and weak points of our welfare system? Too much through transfers and too little to services. So there is a distortion in welfare functions, and then there is also a distortion in terms of distribution. A lot has been given to some categories, very little or nothing has been given to other categories, the vulnerable. Hence, inequalities and imbalances are created. There are tools, especially the national healthcare system, which is universal. It is for everyone, which is an asset compared to other welfare systems. The sustainability of the Italian welfare system is now threatened not only by the public debt, but by the population aging. When talking about welfare today, there is an expenditure allocated 50% to pensions and a lot less to welfare assistance. Do we have to review that? Compared to other countries, if Italy does not invest more in healthcare systems, there's going to be some needs that are not going to be met, as outlined by the different surveys, showing that many people find it difficult to have access to the services that they need unless they are ready to pay directly. And that is not in line with the philosophy of our healthcare system. Today, there are different stakeholders, public, private, profit, and non-profit stakeholders providing welfare services. Maybe we need to strengthen the third sector. Yes, definitely. The third sector already exists. It is pretty much developed. Compared to other countries, in Italy, it is pretty much developed. And this is an asset. But this is also the bad result of the fact that the state is not engaged too much in services. So the third sector has been called upon to replace the state, whereas its duty should be not to bridge the gap of the state, but to be at the forefront to meet people's needs and to test new forms of services which are innovative, in line with people's needs, as in to be a sort of a pioneer compared to the public system. So it should test some new forms, and if they are successful, these new forms should be increased in combination with the intervention of the public sector. President Fedriga. So unbalanced welfare, which is hard to maintain, too many transfers, very few services, need for appealing to the third sector. But reading the newspapers, when talking about welfare, we always talk about pensions. And the political debate goes into a different direction. First of all, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. And thank you for allowing me to talk about this topic. When I was in Parliament, I was in the Labour Commission and I was working on pensions. And thank you for your inputs. Let me say a few things, and I'll try to be short. The percentage of Social Security compared to healthcare that we show, well, a greater reform is needed today. We have to divide Social Security and assistance. Pensions include very different situations, as in there are pensions given according to the contributions paid by the different people. Then it's clear that the pension system has changed, but that's a different story. And that shouldn't be included in the welfare system. Then you have all the different integrations, as in contributions in terms of assistance in the framework of Social Security. It is fundamental to start telling the truth to citizens. As in, today there is a clear change of the social model that we have. Just think about the increase in elderly population, which requires different needs for hospitals. Let's think about the change in the welfare model for our families, households. Once there were big families where there were uncles, aunts, grandparents, that were a sort of social security network to take care of the children. Now we only have families with a mother and a father that live far away from their parents. And it's not that we need to stick to what existed before. We need to change the model. I'll give you an example. And it is a reason for concern for a president. And maybe this is also true for Emilia-Romagna, but this is true certainly in Friuli-Venezia, Giulia. Today we have too many birthplaces with an decrease in population. And if those birthplaces, birth hospitals are left open, it means having less staff available for other services. And those birthplaces are in danger. But if you're going to close those birthplaces, then people are not happy with it. But today it is more urgent to provide an answer, to provide services to the elderly population and their needs. Today, we don't need to follow consensus. A birthplaces with 100 newborns is not secure for the mother and the child. It is a waste of resources, not just financial resources, which is not the main problem, but it is a waste of staff. In 2027, there's going to be 30% less of nurses compared to the European average. If there is no staff, we cannot provide the services. In my opinion, for local healthcare, primary care, we need also to use new technologies to bridge the gap of staff that we're going to have. One last point on propaganda. I said that many times, and I don't want to be political on that. Talking about the elimination of the numerus clausus system for doctors is deeply wrong, because in 2027 there's going to be more graduates in medicine compared to doctors that will retire. There's going to be some lack of staff in some specialization, but that's a different story. But we're going to have a problem with nurses. And if we increase the number of places in medicine, then the people who want to become a nurse would go and attend a graduation course in medicine. So for propaganda, it would be much easier to eliminate the numerus clausus systems everywhere, but that would be a threat to our population. We needed to change the allocation of resources. We need a welfare reform. We also have to look at what exists beyond our national borders. Mr. Bonaccini, being a member of the European Parliament, let's see the data on population aging. In Italy, over 65 account for 24% of the population. We're not too far from Germany, France, and Spain, but we have set a record in Europe. Mr. Bonaccini, we have some virtuous examples. For example, creche in France, assistance to migrants in Germany. So the quality of the service in some countries seems to be better than in Italy. How does Italy have to change? Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the organizers of the meeting for inviting me here. I am Friuli-Venezia Giulia. I see it there. We should have written, I am Emilia-Romagna, but Visit Emilia-Romagna is anyway a good slogan. Well, I've always had a very good relationship with the meeting when I was the president of this region, and thank you for inviting me here as a European Member of Parliament, because Europe will need to adopt a new approach on this. If I think what Italy will be like and Europe will be like in the future, I think that they will need to change a lot in terms of Italian expenditure and in our reply to social and demographic changes. As Massimiliano said, let's not talk about politics, which is quite violent. I closed all the birthplaces which didn't have 500 newborns for security reasons. And we had a protocol to open that, but that was had to be considered by the ministry, because this is a technicality. So this is not the problem. This is not the problem that we have all in this region. So if the politics looks at this problem and tries not to attract votes during elections, the problem is a population decrease. Maybe you read the interview some days ago with Silvio on a newspaper to the director of the Italian Institute for Statistics. In 2050, Italy will have a one-to-one ratio between people producing and working and people that will not be working. This one-to-one ratio is dramatic in itself, but the one that is not going to work will be increasing. I was born in 1967. In 1973, I was 6. My grandfather died. He was about 60. But he was old, they used to say, my family. If I tell people over 60 here that they're old, I will not go back to my car alive. Rightly so, because people who are born today in this region and in Italy overall has 20 years life expectancy longer than the people in the 1960s living in this region. And this is due to the improvement in the lifestyle. It is easier to find a job, better nutrition, better public health care, progress in medicine and technologies, and this is important. But if we live longer, and if we have smaller families, if there is no supply of quality services, the families that cannot afford it, the healthy people who are taking care of the sick people may get sick. So there's going to be new policies for the family. No previous government has done a lot on that. France has an average number of children in households much higher than ours. And in France, there have been family policies for years. With the population decrease, experts would say that before starting to have more children again, it will take decades. So we need more migrants. Because if we're going to have a country where there's going to be more people that need to receive than those who have to work and produce, then the great conquest of democracy will be lost, as in pension, schools, and healthcare for all. A country with more people retired than workers is very bad. So we need to get organized and have a structure in order to be attractive. And I'm talking here as a former president of one of the regions, together with Lombardy, will have more citizens than before. So Italy will decrease its population to 54 million people. And the situation is even more dramatic in the south because many people are traveling to the north of the country, migrating to the north of the country. As for the construction of expenditure, public expenditure, there are different services for which the public sector can manage less and control more. Before resigning, we signed an agreement in this region to allocate resources to the third sector, including social cooperation, to renew their accreditation after 15 years for welfare services managed by private entities. In order to do that, resources are needed, and they have to be allocated to some services that the public sector still must finance. I share a lot with what Fedriga said. The government should pay attention because there are some types of services that can be entrusted to some private entities, although they have to be controlled by the public sector, and that will create new job opportunities. But if we're talking about healthcare, and I have a different idea compared to the government, we don't have to cut funds because the right that has to be protected by the public sector is the right to health care and pensions, because there are two things that we cannot decide in our life: who your parents are and where you're born. So if you are born in a poor family, or if you are born in a region that is more unlucky than others, then you must have a good bank account and you must use private sector services. So the right to health care must be given and must be ensured to everyone, to all citizens. Italy is talking too much about social security and very little about the services, the welfare services that have to be ensured to the population. we didn't want to talk about healthcare. We have decided to talk about welfare only. Now, I want to go to Mr. Galeone. He's an expert of local entities. And we will show you the expenditure of welfare expenditure per head. This is the expenditure in Italy, and there is a significant difference between the south and the north. You can see 72 euro compared to 429 euro in the north of the country. There is an enormous difference in welfare expenditure per head. Where does this difference come from? Are things changing or not? This is the expenditure per head of Italian regions. You have shown at the beginning the welfare system, where the smallest part is given to social expenditure, 106 billions. But 75%, almost 80% of that money is needed for money transfers organized by the National Social Security Institute and the National Labor Office. And so those resources are given for maternity leaves, pensions, and other problems. At a local level, out of 106 billion, there are just 12 billion available. 10 of them are spent directly by the municipalities and 2 by the regions, making transfers to the municipalities. So at a local level, it's just 10 billion. And this difference exists because unlike the healthcare system, which is a universal system at a national level where resources are distributed per head, and the difference is much lower, it's almost 2,000 euro per head, 1.6 for Veneto, 2.4 for Bolzano. So the situation is more balanced. That number is the number related to municipalities. 60% of welfare expenditure is taken from municipal resources. 18% comes from the regions, and only 20% comes from the state. The local welfare is under the responsibility of municipalities, and so there are significant differences where we have different taxes in the different regions. In Italy, if a municipality has a lower tax capacity and therefore cannot allocate or cannot provide the services, fundamental services, the state does not intervene. No, because there is a fund. There are the other municipalities that provide the fund for the poorest municipalities. The state doesn't pay anything. Lately, things have improved because the fund has been increasing for creche and social services. And in the end, it will achieve 1.2 billion euros. So our welfare system is very unbalanced. Municipalities spend 10 billion, but Italian households for welfare spend 47 billion euros. So Italian households pay directly 4 times as much what the municipalities are paying. 1,700,000 Italian households are using family carers. Family carers are the second professional category after teachers. So welfare services have to be paid by the families mostly. You talked a lot about increase in life expectancy, 25% of over 65, 4.5 million people over 80. But the most important thing is the difference between life expectancy and life expectancy in good health. Life expectancy in good health is just 59 years. So, life expectancy in general is over 80 years of age. One thing is to have chronic diseases, and a different thing is to have major disabilities. There are 3 million elderly people who are not self-sufficient. So, for more than 20 years of your life, you're going to have some health problems. Who should pay for that? Who should take care of that? The municipality, the health system, families. So this is where we have to innovate. And there are major differences between the North and the South. The difference in life expectancy in good health between the South and the North is almost 10 years. So the imbalance is very strong. So what we have to do is to supplement resources. Clearly, things have to be redesigned. Welfare is at a crossroads, because if we continue like that, it's going to be impossible. However, we need to innovate not just in services, but also in meeting the needs. 47 billion spent by Italian households are often spent just to have a caregiving service, a control service. So it's a lot of money just to check whether the old man or the old woman is good and takes his or her drugs. So if we have to, if we can get together the elderly, then a lot of money can be saved. Now, talking about the third sector that can help the private sector, there's a lot to say. And let's continue with Undersecretary Albano. In May, the Labour Group for Social Economy was met. What is social economy? It's an army of volunteers, 4.5 million people in our country, 400,000 organizations, 1.5 million employees. We are at the eve of the recovery of the proceedings in Parliament. We're talking about resources because it is important how we allocate resources and how we distribute them. Albano, the question to you. Do we have the funds for social economy, and what are the criteria to allocate these resources? Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much to the organizers of the meeting for inviting me here. Thank you to the Foundation for Subsidiarity, and thank you to Giorgio Vittadini that possibly we're going to meet very soon. It's always a pleasure to be here at the meeting. I came here many times, first as a visitor, and in the past 2 years I came here as a speaker. It's a pleasure for me to tell you what the government is doing on these topics. Because the concept of welfare is very wide. And I am responsible for some sectors. Let's talk about the social economy. This is interesting because I lived the social economy. I was the president of a consortium of social cooperatives. I was the president of associations working in the third sector. So it's a situation that I've worked in for many years, and it was easy for me to work on that. Everything is related to Europe. Europe asked us to implement an action plan by 2025 to identify the stakeholders of social economy and to support the potential of this very important sector. There is a lot of potential. You saw some numbers before, 400,000 entities operating in the third sector in Italy, 1.5 million employees. But this is also quality employment. The third sector provides quality employment. This morning we talked about human and social capital. This is possible in the third sector. Social economy works on that specifically. We also need to increase productivity and employment. One of the characteristics of Italy on employment is the lack of women who are employed. In the third sector, and especially in social economy, "55% are women. 55% of employees are women, and young women especially. So we are working on the goals required by Europe that we want to pursue, and which are a priority for us, as in to help the employment for the youth and women. There is also something else that is very interesting, the correlation index between employment in third sector entities and labor. It's the ratio is 1-to-1, which means that working in social economy as volunteers is important. In Italy, there are 4 million volunteers working in this sector. We can also see it here at the meeting. The volunteers are the soul of the meeting and are the soul of many associations and welfare entities. And that leads to growth. That leads to the acquisition of skills. Today, we talked about the acquisition of skills to grow one's own personal value and human capital. Social economy is particularly important for that. So in the Ministry of Economy, I set up working groups to meet different requests. Here we're talking about tax and financing. We've been working with the Ministry of Companies and the Ministry of Labor. But today it is important to give a role to the stakeholders of social economy in Europe. Italy, from that standpoint, is very rich, and this relates to welfare. Europe would like Italy to bring its skills, its competencies, and the code of the third sector, so our legal framework. Europe would like Italy to export all of that. We can see that Italy also developed its third sector thanks to the volunteers. And not only Catholic volunteers, but also lay volunteers. This is important. In addition to that, it would also be important to provide advantages and simplify the operation of the third sector. Red tape has to be streamlined. We're working on that. And a social economy plan will be proposed, and this is quite interesting. This can be one of the answers, maybe not just the answer, but one of the answers to meet the need for a change in the welfare system. Let me conclude by saying that in the previous legislation, I was in the Finance Commission. There, I was often talking about the need to work on households and on taxes for families. Also, because there is a population decrease. But the other people didn't pay attention to all of that. Today, this is very clear. This is a major step forward. This is not maybe the solution, but this is going to be the first challenge to take on by the government and by Europe. Thank you very much to the Undersecretary.
Noi adesso
Right, so let's turn the page and let's introduce another topic for discussion. So when we say that it is absolutely crucial to somehow protect the welfare system, what do we mean? I mean, is there a connection between the development of welfare and democracy, or is it just about making welfare grow? So we should think about the future in this respect. So I had the opportunity to interview Nadia Ordinati, Columbia University professor, essayist, and politologist. Let's see the interview and then let's go back to our discussion. So, Professor Urbinati, at the end of the day, is there a strict connection between welfare development and democracy, in your opinion? Oh, yes, absolutely, because democracies are political systems and also institutional systems relying on the inclusion of all citizens. And in other words, it's about considering people that can afford providing for their needs or who can't. So it's about a society that has to have recourse to associations for the public sector to help supporting citizens that cannot provide for themselves. So the most affluent citizens have to provide for the most disadvantaged ones. So this is a sort of give and take sort of a framework. Certainly it is about democracy too when we talk about welfare. Well, so Branko Milanovic, one of the greatest world experts when it comes to inequalities, well, says that considering welfare as an expenditure instead as of an investment creates an unequal society. Well, it has been sustaining that for many years now, and actually there are data corroborating this from Europe to the US. So when fundamental services provided for by the public sector have been discontinued, citizens have shown more problems and difficulties and also have felt a little bit diminished and somehow sort of left to themselves. Let's consider, for instance, also the sort of reduction in their interest towards politics, because then citizens feel like being abandoned by politicians. So that generates a further detachment between citizens and politicians. So this has a greater impact also on democracy to some extent. So could we say that weakening the welfare state means somehow facilitating the rising of populism? Habermas wrote some years ago that one of the factors that may explain the growth of populism in Germany and more widely in Europe is the decline of social democratic parties that cared a lot for a welfare state. So anger is exploited by populist parties to somehow get votes and get consensus. So they exploited the lack of satisfaction, not really to fix these problems and to somehow rebuild social service, but instead to exacerbate and put democratic institutions into a crisis. In your opinion, considering that public resources continue to go down, how can private people and the third sector keep the welfare alive? Well, we have two possibilities. Either, well, we create more taxes for the richest ones, and the second strategy is about having public welfare being integrated by social forms of solidarity of some sorts. In Europe, we have already this kind of reality, especially in Italy. So President Fedriga, so Professor Urbinati maybe starts from a different cultural conception than you, but don't you think that the whole debate around, the regional autonomy that was triggered by the latest piece of legislation in the law can just sort of lead to more inequalities? So I just want to say one more thing. When Stefano talked about the fact that we should avoid private healthcare services, but please, so let's not sort of make confusion, because one thing is private healthcare services and one thing is the convention between private operators and public operators. So we have a universal healthcare system regardless of the service provider, and we are the second area with the least number of healthcare operators that have a convention, that have a special agreement with the public sector. So we are not concerned, but the healthcare services that are provided for by private operators through an agreement are to be considered as part of the public healthcare sector. So it's not about paying everything, from your pockets and going into the pockets deeply. This is not the same thing, so we should not sort of make confusion and so make this clear distinction. Secondly, when I saw the comparison between territories, I don't want to quote specific territories, but sometimes it's also about choices or responsibilities, especially when you say something is more present in the north than in the south. So territories that have, 100 times the forest guards of our region that has loads of forests. Is that a choice of welfare? Well, again, it's a choice about expenditure. And then I go back to the regional autonomy issue. It's also a matter of responsibility. I think that can lead to responsibilization, because otherwise the blame is always to be put on somebody else, the state or the region or the single municipality. And even when it comes to the specific sort of claims, and I'm referring to a specific part of this piece of legislation, but some people say, oh, there's a danger because if you finance activities through a participation from the local authorities, so the areas with fewer revenues will be disadvantaged. No, it's not like that, because there is going to be a proportionality. And I say that even though we somehow rely on this system. So again, it's about objectifying the value of a service and see, which are the calculations. Let's imagine that, a certain service will have a certain cost. So then the taxation will cover a certain amount of that cost. So I think that we should not be worried about that. But first of all, if we always reduce every topic to political parties, we will never sort of fix anything. We need not to mix political issues with real issues. So beyond the political debate of the latest weeks, I would like to know if, when it comes to welfare, there could be a response that could be adapted to local areas. Okay, So I've been playing football for many, many years, but if you give me such an asset, I will score a goal. So I can agree with what my colleague said, but if people recently mention public health care services as the top priority now, when they are questioned, well, this means that there is a problem. So that means that public resources are being cut. So if in the past to book a certain public health care service, it took a couple of months. Now you need at least 1 year. Is it true or not? Otherwise, I live in another country. And this is due to the lack of resources, to the lack of staff. Because, I mean, if I have fewer resources and less staff, what happens? Well, the Prime Minister declared that this government was able to achieve the best results when it comes to providing primary healthcare services. Well, I must say what I'm saying, because otherwise we will lie to ourselves. We have more than €500 million that is given for the fund for the lack of self-sufficiency of region, and it is increased every year. And it's about serious and very serious disabled and people who are not self-sufficient any longer, especially because of age reasons. Do you know, out of these €540 million, how many were transferred from the state? I think it's not normal, because the resources are not used for other welfare services. Well, if I will provide kindergarten places for free from the second child onwards, what kind of benefit do I provide? Because then the basic service won't be there. So considering the demographic loss that is pretty dramatic, well, we have to face an issue, and this has to do not just with Italy. So a part of European funds will be used to provide mayors up to €5,200 for new available places in kindergarten, and there are free of charge kindergarten in municipalities of mountain areas. And again, this is something incredible, and citizens like this measure. So I think that Europe should make resources available for new welfare services connected to the demographic evolution of population. And this because Europe is asking for new rigor from 2025, and we are already working on that in order to be able to respond to the needs of social economy and see how we will be able to provide new services. So I think that left-wing parties should not give the idea that they are in favor just of one solution or another. I'm speaking generally, because the history of the left-wing parties has always been in favor of local communities. So kindergarten were born in this region for a reason, because they were not expecting financing from Rome. So I would say that the autonomy that was put into practice here was strongly unequal. Just read the latest article by Vittadini about these topics, because when you talk about residual taxation and doesn't define the first tiers of definitions, in order to move from historic expenditure to standard costs, well, a negotiation must be carried out and a compromise should be found. So if you take away the resources from some activities, you will have somehow to integrate them somewhere else. We have 20 Italian regions, 15 have an ordinary ordinary rules. And then this government has considered 4 regions of the north as free. There are no other regions in other parts that are thinking about the autonomy. But please have a look at that, because we still have time to do something about it, because we should need something much more balanced. But we are being told, oh, it's not possible. If the Democratic Party has won the EU election, the European elections in the south, is just because many citizens are afraid of this new regional autonomy law, because they are afraid of what may result from that. So I hope that this law will be corrected and fixed. Well, we do not want to transform this talk into political debate, but I have to say that the so some things will be implemented only when possible, and also there are the essential performance levels will be guaranteed regardless of the service provider. So it is dramatic that some people affirm that these basic levels of performances won't be necessarily provided for. Okay, so it is important to know that if everything will be centralized, citizens won't have the same rights. And I think that stating this is a shame, because it's not true. We had first seen the president of Apulia region, Mr. Emiliano, but he told us a few hours ago that he could not join us. And it's a pity not having him, because he would have told certainly interesting things. But we have 2 great presidents, and I'd like to make a step back and go back to a very concrete thing. And we're almost running out of time. So, Undersecretary, I have a question, and I would like to ask you something. We have 60 billion of real estate possibilities that are not used. So it's about maybe using social housing. So is there something being prepared? Yes or no? Or is that still a dream? So first of all, I understand that, well, now, I mean, the debate is pretty hot, but the differentiated autonomy debate it's a pretty old one. So the fact that it is about finally to be implemented is incredible. And I mean, not all regions will request for that, but then with the primary care levels, there will be a specific differentiation on that. I come from a central Italy region, and usually people polarize the things, and they talk about either the north or the south. But here we have a 3 sort of tier Italy. We have central Italy that should not be underestimated. And when it comes to central Italy, so this is a key issue, and I say it out loud and clear because tonight the anniversary of the earthquake of 2016 will be somehow remembered. So many people died, and this is certainly one of the greatest wounds of Italy, because the aftermath of the earthquake is still there. So that earthquake hit the heart of Italy, and we know that deep problems have been brought about that earthquake. So we need to guarantee the safeguard, regeneration and recovery of those areas. So first of all, I have a public real estate enhancement proxy. And I realized that actually there is an unused public real estate heritage, and through decommissioning, sometimes such assets have been decommissioned in a strange way. But today, we could do something to enhance it, specifically to do something different of it. And we have a specific office that has been set up to deal with this. So we can somehow finalize different goals. Which are they? So everybody talks about living today, living solutions. We talked about the oldest ones. We talked about demography. We talked about job finding difficulties both for women and youth. But then we have also the housing issue that is a huge problem because a family needs a household, needs a house, a building, and also the building, the house is the place, the ideal place of a family. So we need to enhance the real estate heritage, in particular for social housing, for young couples, for old people. So seniorizing is another possibility. You talked about the senior decree, and co-housing is a key element, the intergenerational senior housing solution, and so that all people could be somehow reintegrated in the social fabric. We need to reinforce and rebuild the relations that made Italian families the pillar of our economy. And I'm really talking about economy. And now, for the time being, all this is lacking. So we need Italian residential models. So housing means family, means well-being, means sports, means nutrition, means third sector, so connection, possibility of cohabitation. So that leads to the definition and shaping of a new model. In all this, the third sector is the key pillar and characterizing, first and foremost, our way of making social housing a reality. So the third sector may be a great help. So we could think about public-private partnership solutions, especially when the private can co-share both the design and the conception of such solutions. And this is done specifically to respond to some current difficulties. So real estate enhancement initiative. Oh yes, these models are being defined. You already have applications. So some things have already been made, but this model will be replicable. So we have these great projects, like the one mentioned by the Undersecretary, but also other examples. So again, I'd like to go back to the local dimension because Enrico made another interview with the former mayor of Fornovo. Fornovo is a very small municipality in the province of Parma, 6,000 inhabitants. Michela Zanetti was the mayor for some years, and she told us about a collaboration between local entities, the third sector, and this fruitful partnership was extremely successful. From 2002, we started a very important initiative about the co-design of youth and family services. This co-design activity was not easy to start, but then we were able to gather all the relevant stakeholders, public ones, but mostly the private ones, and the third sector stakeholders like associations, and so it was extremely fruitful. So we, let's say, trained a lot, and we got used to working together. going beyond specific sort of watertight compartment categorizations. Never Alone is a project for remote support of senior people who do not have specific needs, and we have the municipality and another local department supported this initiative, and the recipients are people living alone in isolated places. Could you really improve the life quality of people? Well, I think so, yes. And we could insist and create specific solutions based on human relations. So these somehow listening ability, listening to other people's needs, has become a sort of common practice. And you are able also to extend this model to other valleys. We saw that these communities learned a lot. And the mutual exchange let them found solutions. Do you think that this could be scalable in other realities? Well, to me, this is a scalable model that could be replicated because it is based on the participation of all the relevant stakeholders. For instance, companies that believe in research, in culture, in associations. So in those intermediate entities and bodies, so they seem to be open to trust-based relations. So it was a really fruitful experience. And human relations are always the key, especially when it is about building trust. So there are no flawless protocols and procedures. You can write up hundreds of protocols, but actually the really working ones are those based on trust relations.
Non doveva portare l'acqua al proprio mulino, a giugno ha finito il suo mandato, quindi non si è più presentato. Non doveva...
So, Mr. Galeone, when the mayor said that it is through confrontation that you can find solution, that seems to be pretty incredible, especially when it comes to certain topics. So, do you think that this model is really scalable?
So, administrations need to work on the integration of services, starting from the person itself, and to create tailor-made services for different people, and to work on integration, especially in the healthcare system. This is why we need autonomy and freedom. We have described our system, and it is centralized. Imbalances are also due to the fact that there is low autonomy. This is the possibility to innovate, to be flexible in rules, and also co-designing. Co-designing has to be made in order to provide a new mix of services. Otherwise, the problem is not going to be solved. Otherwise, we cannot bridge the gap between the needs and resources. We are at a crossroads because we have to understand whether we can afford this welfare system. This does not only apply to Italy, but also to Europe. In Europe, the welfare system is a social test. It is unique. We in the European Union account for less than 6% of the world population, less than 20% of GDP, and spend 43% of the welfare expenditure worldwide. We are a social test, and the European Action Plan, in addition to competitiveness and sustainability, is trying to maintain this level of welfare. It's not easy. This is why we have organized this talk. And we're now coming to an end in order to better understand the Italian welfare and to understand the future and the challenges ahead. So we would like to call on stage the president of the Foundation for Subsidiarity, Giorgio Vittadini.
Ma io ho assistito in modo molto interessato a questo dibattito perché
I was very interested in this debate because our aim to organize this debate is to show that this is an important problem, whereas oftentimes people think that it is not very important. Following up to what has just been said, in the near future, given the population aging, given the rise in debt, given all the problems in production, we will be able to ensure everyone what has been given to our generations. This is work in progress. And I'll tell you something, together with Galeone, the Bank of Italy, and Istat, and Ipsos, we are completing the next report of our Foundation for Subsidiarity on subsidiarity and local welfare. This is a research made by the institutions having all the numbers so that this kind of debate can become topical. So we'll come and see you in the regions so that this topic can be discussed. Because the point is, will we be able to ensure the quality of life that we had to our youth when they will be grandparents? Will it be possible to transform what is superfluous in what is lacking? These are key questions. And to paraphrase what has been said over these days, they are even more important than cakes. It is important to speak about everything, but we need to focus on the main value of politics. Politics is an asset because when politics is done well, as we have seen today, although from different perspectives, is something enabling citizens to live. And this is what happens at the meeting. Thank you very much to Professor Vittadini. Thanks to all of you for your patience, for bearing with us over these 3 episodes. Enjoy the evening, and thank you to our guests. Enjoy the meeting. Bye-bye.
civiltà dell'amore. Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia? Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?